Welcome to Finding Home Healing. I'm your host, Sadie. I believe you were born with a light that guides you to your higher self and most passionate life. But for many of us, it's been extinguished or lost. My mission is to help you find your way back home to that light so that you can love deeper, live in your power, and truly thrive. For those lost or lonely souls, welcome home. Welcome back to Finding Home Healing. I decided to wrap 3 different topics into one today. I was originally going to do them in 3 different episodes, but I realized that they all kind of go together and they flowed nicely in one episode. So we're going to go through 3 different concepts today to help you take an inventory of your emotional health, help you understand what emotional health is, and to help you live in your light most of the time. So those 3 topics are 1, having a sense of self, which is different than an identity. Number 2, understanding emotions and their weight. And number 3, what it means for you to be in your light and how to be in your light most of the time. This episode is going to be really helpful for those of you who want to overcome lifelong self-defeating patterns that keep repeating. And those of you who are interested in your own emotional health and want to make it better. And obviously, those of you who want to live in your light most of the time. We're going to discuss what that means to you specifically later on, so stay with me. This 3rd topic of what it means to be in your light and how to do it most of the time, it is really, really, really valuable and really important. And I left it as the 3rd topic we'll discuss for a reason, so stick with me through the other 2 topics. If they don't seem as interesting to you, fast forward to the 3rd one, because I really want everybody who's tuning into this episode to get the information in that 3rd point. So again, if anything else, I want you to walk away from hearing point number 3. Okay, but we're going to start sequentially. So let's dive in. Topic number 1, having a sense of self. I was actually working with a client recently who, through our whole conversation, we discovered that she didn't have a sense of self. When I asked her to connect to it, which in the way that I do it with people is I ask them to connect to their core. Your core is a column of energy that exists from the crown of your head to the base of your perineum. I've talked about this in other episodes. It's like a core of an apple or trunk of a tree. It's something that is a stable core inside of your physical body. It's inhabiting your physical body, but it's energetic and it is yourself. Connecting to it is your sense of self. And when I was asking her to connect to it, she was like, I don't know. It's not there. And I was like, okay, what are you thinking, feeling, seeing, hearing when you think about self and when you think about connecting to your core? Does anything come up? And she was like, nope, it just is blackness. And I was like, okay, that's very interesting. There's a problem there. We need to get you connected to your sense of self. Even if you don't feel like it's there, it is there, but there might be something blocking you from connecting to it, or there might be something inhabiting it or taking it away or making it elusive, like you can't connect to it. So we want to break all those blocks, get through that. And in this particular client's case, we needed to help her get a connection to it at all, to have some type of what's called an internal representation or some type of association to her sense of self. So what I explained and what I want to explain to you all is that you have an energetic signature. And this is what I refer to like on some of the copy on my website. And when I talk to people, when I'm having one-on-one sessions with them, I can read people's energetic signature. I can tune into somebody and I won't know every single thing about them, of course not. And I need permission before I do that. I can't just go do that with whoever. It's just like a website on the internet. Your energetic signature is like the domain, and your personality, thoughts, feelings, opinions, all those other things that make up your identity are like your website. And your website can change. You can update color palettes and your brand, different images, what you write in your copy or how you say things, how things are formatted. You can literally change your entire website platform to be something different. So your identity can change and transform and all these things, but your domain does not change. Your energetic signature does not change. It is always the same. So when you are like, oh, I want to go to I don't even know what's an example, like NewYorkTimes.com. You type in www.newyorktimes.com and that will take you to the website of New York Times. I imagine over the last, 30 years that their website has had so many iterations over and over again. That's like a person's identity. Your identity can have different iterations over and over again. Your personality can have different iterations over and over again. You can change different things about yourself, like or dislike different things at different times, change your clothes, change your hair color, even change parts of your personality, like how introverted or extroverted you are and how sensitive or not sensitive you are, all those kinds of things. So you can update and change your website all you want, but your domain doesn't change. Your energetic signature does not change. That is your sense of self. Your energetic signature is yourself, the selfness. It's really annoying because in the English language, I come up to this battle a lot that we don't have the correct vocabulary in this language to describe a lot of things. So I have to figure out how to bridge the gap in language to help us understand things that are energetic and unseen and bring it back down to like a solid, grounded, three-dimensional language communication to be able to share it with you. So even though that's still maybe not even the best word, that column of energy, that energetic signature is yourself. And having a sense of self is your ability to connect to that energetic signature, to know your own domain. And again, it does not mean it's your personality and what you like or dislike and how you are. Who you are is your identity, but your signature is your sense of self. Okay? I'm going to beat that into the ground. One thing that's really cool about this is you can access older versions of yourself. And this is what came up with this client. She was really struggling at the time that I was seeing her, and she wanted to revert back to an old self. She was having a lot of thoughts around, I'm never going to be that self again. I've lost her. I've changed completely forever, and I'm never going to be the same, because she liked a version of herself that existed, months ago, because she was doing a lot better. She had better mental health and was really thriving and doing what she loved and just really succeeding on her path at that time. And she wanted to go back to that. And I said, well, we can actually access older versions of ourselves. That's what's so beautiful about learning and understanding energy, is that you have a timeline that we can go access, go get the energy of the website or of your personality, the version of yourself, the version of your domain, your energetic signature that existed back then. And that's what's so cool, is we can do this in the future too, but I'll talk about that in a second. We can go back into the past, grab that version of your website, that version of you, yourself, and bring it here into the present moment and integrate it with who you are right now. And she was like, wait, what? You can do that? And I was like, yes. It's analogous to what's called the Wayback Machine on the internet. This is an actual thing. You can look up on Google, the Wayback Machine, and type in a domain, and it will show you snapshots that the internet has taken of every website imaginable. I think I looked on there yesterday and it had like 916 billion websites, which is insane. I did the math. I think it was something like 112 websites per person on the planet today. And I was like, who's making all these websites? That is so wild and crazy. I cannot believe that. But anyway, you can go back to the Wayback Machine and look at old snapshots of somebody's website or of any website that's been public at any point in time. And it's so cool because you see a calendar and then you can click on the year, the month, and the date. And then there's a little snapshot with a little number title. And then you can click on that link and it will send you to the website that existed at that time. It's wild. That exact same thing can happen energetically with you. It can happen with your energetic signature. All you need is access to your domain. So what I had this particular client do is we floated back to that time on her timeline, accessing this quote unquote Wayback Machine energetically. And I had her connect to the quote unquote website or her personality or who and how she was at that time, remembering how she felt, what she saw, what she was hearing, what she felt like, how she was interacting with the world around her. And I had her make what's called an internal representation. I had her take a snapshot, like one of those pictures from the Wayback Machine. And I had her like go into it, looking through her own eyes so she could feel all the sensations of when that version of her existed. And I had her bring that version of her back to this present moment in time and integrate it with the picture or the internal representation or the website of herself of who she is now, so that the energetic signature had an amalgamation or a combination of these two versions of herself, not just that she was only living in one or the other. And when we did that, she had this integration experience that was like, oh, I feel so much better now. And it's what's the word for that? It's subtle. It's not like, this profound, crazy boom of a feeling, but it's like a calmness and a peace of like, oh, I feel so much better now that I'm like more integrated. And what's so cool is that you can do this in the future. According to laws of physics and the multiverse, there is an infinite amount of iterations of yourself. And I'm not going to go into this because this is another episode for another time. But there's an infinite amount of iterations of yourself available to you. And you have the power and permission to go into any one of those timelines, into any one of those versions of yourself in the multi, get information, aka a snapshot of that version of you, and bring it back to you here and now in the present moment. And that will put you on the trajectory of that timeline, of that version of you that's existing in the future. I know it sounds crazy and it's like, what the heck are you talking about, Sadie? I almost said a bad word there, but I am trying really hard to not have bad words. I know it sounds crazy, but it is so cool. I've actually done this before and I'm continuing to practice it, and I do it with clients all the time. This is a huge way that I help people heal all their stuff. We're going back using the Wayback Machine energetically to go back to versions of them on the timeline that existed before here and now. We go gather up those fragments or those pieces of them, bring them back into the here and now, integrate them, and then go pull versions of them in the future that they want to be or that they would like to be. Go, get a felt sense of what it feels like and get that internal representation of that, bring it back into the present moment, and then boom, we have a healed version of the past, a peaceful version of the present, and a trajectory of who you want to be in the future. It is so freaking cool. What's important in all of this that I'm talking about is that, shockingly and unfortunately, many of us have a hard time accessing our sense of self. And in my opinion, this is like the first step towards anything. You have to have a sense of self to have any meaning in life, in relationship, in career, in any endeavor that you do. If you're, building a business or a project, or I don't even know what it could be, but you have to have a sense of self to have impact and to live your life in a meaningful way. If you lack meaning in your life, my guess, if I were to really dig into you psychologically, it would be that you don't have your sense of self. And you have to practice getting connected to your sense of self, to that energetic signature, to accessing your domain so that you can look at your website and make changes to it, edit it, upgrade it, downgrade it, whatever it is that you want to do to it. Okay, we want to integrate all the versions of you that have existed from back when existence was created into here and now, and allow that to put you on a better trajectory of your timeline in the future. So shockingly, many of us don't have access to our sense of self. There are ways in which you can practice it. I do lead clients through meditations and exercises to get connected to their core, their sense of self, to develop pictures and internal representations, associations, and sounds for their sense of self. For this particular client, I got a download that it would be helpful if I connected her sense of self to things that she does love. And so I had her imagine that her sense of self was like a tree, like her core was a tree, and that the divine hand engraved musical notes into the tree with a beautiful melody playing that represented certain ways of being that she wanted to be, like warm and loving and soft and all those different things. So I had her imagine that her energetic signature was represented, it was symbolized. Remember, your unconscious mind can only really think and communicate in symbols. So anytime that I'm working with somebody, more often than not, I'm working with symbols, like what things represent and metaphors. That's how I can communicate with the unconscious mind, both my own and anyone else's. So the better that you get at symbology, understanding it, respecting it, appreciating it, and being able to read symbols, the more you'll be able to communicate with your unconscious mind. So I had her imagine that her sense of self was analogous to this tree trunk with the divine hand carving musical notes into the tree permanently for all of time, and that anytime she felt lost or distanced from herself, that she would go back to that image, that internal representation of what she was feeling, seeing, hearing, saying to herself. Okay? Those are types of meditations and exercises that you can do on your own if you would like, and I can lead you through them if that's ever something that you would like to do in the future with me, like in a one-on-one or in my women's circle when I, work with multiple women at a time and we all support each other. But that's really the biggest way that I help people, and in my opinion, personally and professionally, how we get connected to our sense of self is we access our core. There's also a book that I would highly recommend written by Stephen Kessler called The 5 Personality Patterns. He is a big teacher of mine. He doesn't know it, but I loved this book, The 5 Personality Patterns, and he has exercises in there for helping you get connected to your core. They're ones that I've adapted to make what I do. There's also a teacher by the name of David Waldas. He does something called the Aligned Living System. He helps you access your core as well. It's really, really helpful. He has certain meditations and exercises that help you get connected to that core and bring energy down into you and grounding it and all of that good stuff. It's really, really powerful stuff. Like, I've adapted everything that I do from all these different teachers. If you've listened to my part 2 story, like, that's how I am the way that I am because I've learned to do this for myself and now I give it to other people. So that's a really helpful way to get connected to your sense of self. Again, I want to make this point clear that it's important that this is the step that we start with. If we do not have a connection to our sense of self, if we do not practice and exercise connecting to our core, connecting to our sense of self, then we can't really do anything else. Everything else, in my opinion, is just moot. Meaning it's, invalid. Like, you can't do it. You can't change your website if you can't access your domain. You just can't do it. You can't upgrade anything if you don't have the access or the address to do it, the location of it. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one there. Having a sense of self, very, very important for emotional health. If you are noticing that maybe you don't have a sense of self, that's okay. Don't panic. Don't freak out. There's nothing wrong with you. You are totally okay. Try these exercises where you get connected and you just tune into, like, okay, if I were to think about a column of energy from the crown of my head down to the base of my perineum, which is, again, the base of your torso, what would I see? What do I see when I feel connected to myself? How do I feel? What do I experience? Ask yourself these questions and get more in touch and in tune with your energetic signature. Cool? Okay, we're going to move on to point number 2. I hope that this is clear for everybody. Number 2 is understanding emotions and their weight. I can't put enough weight onto how important it is to understand emotions and weight for you to have a happy, healthy life and to live in your light. If you do not understand emotions, you will probably struggle a lot more than a person who does understand emotions. So even if it's maybe not like super interesting to you or you don't feel called to or magnetized to it as much, think of it like eating your vegetables. You just need to know it. It's important to know it, and it's important to have high EQ, high emotional intelligence. Something to understand about emotions is that they are energy in motion. Energy in motion. Emotions are energy in motion. When they get stuck, they cause problems because they are no longer in motion. That's a lot of times what causes physical pain and diseases. I'm not saying in all cases, but in a lot of cases. Emotion is energy in motion. When you stop that motion, you start creating problems. They have a specific frequency along an energetic scale. like notes on a piano. There's a range from high to low. They have different weights energetically also. So there's a frequency, they're from high to low, like notes on a piano, all emotions. Think of it like the spectrum of light, right? There's different wavelengths of light on the spectrum of light. Some wavelengths are really big and long, and some are really, really short and smashed together. You can't see all of the spectrum of light. You can't see emotions. I can see the effects of emotions. Like I've talked about in one of my episodes, I think it was like how people affect you, or how to stop letting other people's moods affect you, or something like that. I talk about how I can see like negative emotional energy on people, like an energy blob or on their energy field. But that's besides the point. Emotions are kind of invisible. You can feel them, obviously. Like you feel when you feel sad, you feel when you feel joyful, you feel when you feel angry. That's very obvious. You don't need Einstein to know when you feel a certain way. But I do find that a lot of us, sometimes myself included, have a hard time identifying our emotions. So you have to understand what they are first and then learn how to identify them, right? So their energy and motion, they have a specific frequency along a scale, like notes on a piano. They range from high to low, and they have different weights energetically. Higher vibrational emotions have lighter weights. Lower vibrational emotions have heavier weights. Okay, what does that mean? Something like anger. It's actually not as low of a vibration as you'd think it was, but it's still somewhat heavy in the sense that when it gets stuck, it's not pleasant to experience anger most of the time. Something that's even lower on the frequency scale is actually sadness. Sadness is a very like depressive, very heavy, right? It's heavy type of emotion. It keeps you really low and not wanting to do anything, unmotivated, not energetic. Like there's no motion or movement with sadness. So it's very, very low. And it's very, very heavy. Depression and just feeling down on oneself, like those types of things, those emotions are heavy. They're lower on the frequency scale. Emotions like joy are very high on the emotional scale, frequency-wise. They are higher frequency, so they're lighter. They're much easier in some ways to have, and they make you feel good. There's this sense of like elevation, and when you feel joy versus when you feel depression, you're more elevated, you're more expansive, you're quote unquote higher. You're not feeling mopey and your head's not, like hanging down and all that kind of thing. So there's a spectrum here. Now, if you have a hard time labeling your emotions, I do suggest that you look up on Google. There's a resource called an emotion wheel that can be really helpful to pinpoint different emotions. It gives you a whole lot of options of words to help describe different frequencies of feeling along that scale. Or I actually just was referred to an app the other day by a client that I'm actually really loving. It's called How We Feel. The app is called How We Feel, and it allows you to check in with your emotions based off of how you're feeling throughout the day. You can do it as many or as little times as you want, and there's this whole library of emotions that you can choose from, whether it's high energy and pleasant, high energy and unpleasant, low energy and pleasant, low energy and unpleasant. Now, at the time of this recording, that's what it's like. But it is super cool. And if you have a hard time labeling your emotions, I would suggest that you go through practices and exercises of figuring out what it is that you feel at certain times. And that app can be really helpful for you. So those are important things to note, like logically and just to understand in the background. Now, emotions are very tricky. You have to be very, very careful to keep the power dynamic in check between you and emotions. You have to remember, you are not your emotions, and emotions are not you. You are two separate energetic signatures, right? This is actually where it comes into play, where how multiple domains, maybe you do or don't know this, but if you don't, this exists. If there's multiple domains that you have, you can point different domains to one website, okay? That's like when you have emotions. Emotions are their own domain, they're their own energetic signature, they're their own frequency of energy and vibration they can be pointed to your website. So your website can be impacted by your feelings, by your emotions, or by the emotions. I don't even want to call them yours. They can be impacted by the emotions that you are feeling or experiencing at any given moment in time. But you have to understand that that's not your core frequency. That's not your core vibration, your core energetic signature. It's not your domain. It's just a domain that's temporarily pointing to your website. So if we were to access, anger, then it would pop up with your website if you're experiencing anger, because that emotion is being pointed towards you. Now, what's important is that emotions, if you give them more power than they need or deserve, then you are willingly giving your power away. And that is not appropriate. You have to keep the power dynamic in check between you, your energetic signature, and the emotions, the energetic signature of those emotions. You are more powerful than them. You have to exercise your authority over them so that the emotions and you are validated, they're acknowledged, they're recognized, heck, they're even accepted for a certain amount of time. And though they are not given any more power than they have already taken for themselves. Okay? You have the power to either give them or taketh away the power from the emotions. How do you do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and I'm going to go over a couple. But one really powerful way is to neutralize the emotion. Emotions have a charge. Even if they're a lower frequency emotion that has a lot of weight, there's a charge to that frequency. Again, another analogy would be like electricity. When you have a hot wire, it's got a charge of energy behind it. And if you poke it, then you're going to get shocked, right? Emotions have a charge of energy behind it, right? Because it's energy in motion. So there's a charge that's behind each emotion. And if you let yourself be the one that holds on to it, like you're poking it in this analogy of the hot wire, then you're going to get shocked. You're going to feel the impact of that emotional frequency. And the best way to limit that impact of the emotional frequency is to neutralize them. Now, one way that you can do that is to actually acknowledge and accept the feeling. Like, I'm sad right now. I know I will become unsad. I don't know when, I don't know how, but it will happen and it's going to be okay. In that moment, you are fully actually embracing and accepting the experience, the emotion, which ironically and counterintuitively makes it easier to let go and to not shock you, to not impact you. Because what you're doing in that moment is you're neutralizing the emotion. You're getting rid of the charge. It would be like if, in this example of this hot wire, if you put one of those little plastic knobs over the end of a wire. I don't know if any of you know this. This is like such a weird, random thing that I know about electricity. But electricians, if they have hot wires out and there's juice to those wires, they have to put these little plastic caps over them so that the energy of the the energy of the electricity won't be able to impact anyone or anything if it actually accidentally gets touched. So neutralizing the emotion is analogous to that, putting this little plastic cap over it, where you're like, I see you, I know that you're here, this hot wire emotion, I recognize it, I acknowledge that you're here, that's okay. I know that this isn't going to be this way forever. I know that I'm just riding this wave of this temporary emotion and it's hard and it sucks and I want to express it and I want to cry or I want to punch something or I want to just lay around and be lazy or I want to be afraid and hole up in my shelter or whatever it is. Even just acknowledging it and accepting it, that's going to do the most power, in my opinion, to neutralize it. And again, there's a bajillion different ways to do this, so I by no means know everything. I don't have every answer, but this is how I've learned to do it myself. So in an example of this sadness, right? Like I'm sad right now. I will become unsad. I don't know when or how. It will happen. I'll be okay. Sadness is a pretty heavy emotion. We've already established that. You can get caught up in its weight and give all your power away to it. That's what I'm essentially saying here is that there comes a moment in time where you have a choice to either maintain all your power or take all your power back by recognizing that the emotion is temporary, it's an event, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, and that it doesn't have to own you, that it doesn't have power over you, and take that power back so that you're not giving it all away. Okay? You're taking the power back, you're neutralizing the emotion, you're taking that emotion down a peg off of its throne. Like, it thinks that it's God. Like, oh, I'm going to, be the controller of this person because me as this emotional energy, they don't have like sentient thoughts. But as an emotion, if I were to personify it, it would be, like, oh, I'm so mighty and I'm so powerful. I have control over this person now. This is a process where you do not fall into its gravity. You do not let its weight pull you down and take all of your power and be impacted by it. You take the power back, you neutralize the emotion, lessen its charge, recognize that it's here for a reason, and let it give you its wisdom and gifts. This is something that is so untalked about. It needs to be talked about more, in my opinion. Emotions have messages. Energy and motion are here for a reason. They have messages for us. We have to glean wisdom, and they're gifts for us. Fear, very valuable emotion. Not valuable to hold on to and make it run your life. It's not appropriate to keep holding on to it, but it is very appropriate in certain moments in time when it needs to teach you something. You better bet your dollar that if you're out in the wilderness and there's a bear that's, 100 yards away and you spot it and your body immediately goes into fight or flight and in fear, and it's getting your body moving in a direction away from that bear, more so than your logical brain could process if you didn't have that emotion, that could save your life. So emotion is not bad in every case or in every sense. When you give it all of your power, it's bad. Like, if you're so afraid of bears that you won't even step foot into the mountains, now that's probably not super supportive to you. That might hinder you in many different ways. If you live in a mountainous town and you're terrified of bears and you don't want to leave your house because you're afraid of a bear, that's inappropriate and out of proportion in the context of the situation. That's something that fear would be inappropriately taking your power away from you. But if you're, again, in the forest and one's 100 yards away from you and your body kicks into gear with that fear, your fight or flight system gets your body moving in the right direction and makes your breath quieter and makes your footsteps, lighter, and you are not picked up by the bear's perception, the bear doesn't notice you, that's going to save your life. Okay, so we understand that. Emotions are not bad or wrong. Even what we call negative emotions, they are all valuable and they have wisdom, they have gifts to share. In an experience of, this is a hard one, but like grief. Grief is a hard emotion. I have had so much grief in my life. I have had a lot of loss in my life. Even in my stories that I share in my episodes, like, that's just skimming the surface of how much loss I've had and how much grief I've had to transform into wisdom and gifts. But that's the thing. If you can learn something from an emotional event or from an emotion itself, then you're able to extract the value from that event, take an amazing gift from that experience, and then use it for good. I also talk about that concept in another episode, where you take a negative experience and you transform it for good. That's what you're doing with these emotions as well. You are taking their gifts that they have for you and using them to your benefit. When you do that, the emotion has lived its purpose and it can be let go of. If you have an emotion that's stuck in you, or you can't get over something, or you're grieving something, like I was working with a client who was getting over an ex, and she was lost in so many emotions and so much grief and sadness, rightfully so. Like, when we have breakups, when we have divorces, when we have separations from people or things or places, it's really hard. It's really hard. I, for one, understand what that means. I've moved around so much in my life. I've had so much loss, all the things. I get it. It is super, super hard. And sometimes we can get stuck in those emotions if we do not move them around. So the thing to remember that's important is that emotions shan't be stuck. They shouldn't get stuck inside of you. You have to let them go. Once you glean the learning from them, they've lived their purpose. They do not need to be here anymore. There's no purpose to them existing once they've fulfilled their purpose for you. You take away the message, the wisdom, the gift, and then it goes away and you let it go. Okay? I explain emotions to people like it's like having dinner. It's like an event. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not a sustained way of being. If you're experiencing emotion as a sustained way of being, then you've identified with that emotion. You've integrated that domain into your website so like incestually that you believe that you are the emotion. If you've experienced depression and anxiety so much in your life, like I was one of them, you identify with the fact that that's just how and who you are. And until you get knocked out of that reality that isn't real, you will continue living as if that emotion is congruent with your identity. And it is not. Because like I said earlier, you are not your emotion and your emotion is not you. Okay? If you're living in an experience that your beingness, like who you are, is an emotion, then you've identified with it. And we have to separate out those ties. We have to get you unraveled and get that domain stopping referencing your website, like remove it and let it point to some other website because it doesn't belong pointing to yours. You are not your emotion. Cool? One last thing I'll say about this, processing emotions can be very challenging and very difficult. I get that. We have not been given a structure or a framework in humanity to be able to process this type of energy and emotions specifically, obviously, is what I'm talking about. So when we have an emotion, like I said, it's an event. There's a beginning, middle, and end, just like having dinner. Just like how when we eat dinner, we have to digest our food, our body is programmed automatically to do that whole process. We don't have to do a gosh darn thing. All we do is shovel food in our mouth and we poop it out and we're good to go. Now, there's a lot of issues that come up where it's like if you have leaky gut, then you can't absorb your nutrients and blah, 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 all the things. But essentially, your body is programmed to do the digestion process automatically. We do not have an emotional digestion process built in automatically. So if you've had exposure to people who don't know how to manage emotions, don't know how to digest emotions, don't know how to process emotions or release emotions, then you probably have a maladaptive way of dealing with your feelings. And even like on top of that, layered is like society and gender roles. And I mean, granted, I am definitely all for men being men and being masculine. I'm very much a proponent of like the masculine feminine polarity dynamic being intact, and all the men are being weakened and, you know, little boys that don't have purpose and don't know their power. That's a problem. But I also believe that men are allowed to feel feelings, process feelings, and then move through them. Okay, so I'm not talking to the layer of what a topic would be like if we were on that conversation. This is just simply about like every human being has a right to an emotional digestion process, just like every human being has a right to a physical digestion process with food and pooping, right? In the process of eating, you take in food, your body reassimilates all of the molecules, it takes the nutrients, and it excretes the waste. Your body does that naturally. You have to learn to do that emotionally. You have to learn to take an emotion, assimilate it, rework it, get the gifts, the wisdom, and the learnings out of it, aka the nutrients, and then eliminate the waste. Let go of the rest of the emotion that's going to be hurtful to you or others. This process I call emotional digestion, go figure. And I do actually have that process available on my website if you opt in with your email at findinghomehealing.com. So if you would like that process and you would like guidance through that, feel free to opt in there, findinghomehealing.com. Just opt in with your email. That's going to be really supportive to you. I want to make sure that everyone that I work with has that available to them. And I want you to ensure that if this is something that you struggle with or something that you would like to improve, that this is where you go to get it. Cool? All right. We are moving on to point number 3. This is, even though the first 2 points were so important, again, they could have been their own episodes themselves. I didn't realize that until I started outlining this episode. It took me like 3 hours to outline it because I was just like, wow, I'm really jamming. But this third point is really, really important. I'm going to be talking about something called schemas. We're going to get into it. I'm going to tell you all about it. I personally believe that if we as human beings understood schemas, we would be able to change the trajectory of humankind. I know that's a really bold statement, but you're going to understand it in a moment. If parents were able to understand schemas and raise their children in alignment with the knowledge of what schemas provide to us, then we would have far less trauma. We would have far less susceptibility to evil forces taking over and taking control of our light. We would have far less people that give away their power knowingly or unknowingly, that don't live in their light, that don't follow their passion. If we understood schemas and parents were able to help train their children to understand the world and reality in a healthy, helpful way, then so many of the problems that we've been dealing with for humanity for ages and ages of time would greatly improve. I'm not going to say that it would fix it completely, but it would greatly improve. Oh my gosh, it is so important. Okay? So what it means for you to be in your light and how to be in your light most of the time. Well, I want to ask you, what does being in your light mean to you? Do you even know what that means? Do you know what you are like or who you are like when you're in your light? Have you ever felt like you were totally in your light? Can you remember a time, any time in the past, where you were in your light? You felt like the most highest aligned, best version of yourself. Has that ever happened for you? Being in your light means something different for every person. I don't claim to know what it's like to be in your light or what it's like for you to be in your light. Maybe being in your light means that you feel confident, capable, not sacrificing your well-being for other people's peace. Maybe it means that you feel softer and surrendered, more open and receptive to your own feelings and other people's feelings. Maybe it means that you feel goofy and abundant, lighthearted, or carefree. Maybe it means that you feel like authoritative and really strong and empowered and like trudging forward no matter what, not giving a crap about what anyone thinks or does. For me, being in my light means a whole lot of things. I actually wrote these down because I'm like, ooh, this is really exciting to think about. Being in my light means being really excited, which I feel like I'm in my light right now. If you can't tell, I talk really fast and I'm very excited. It means being elevated, expansive, positive, abundant, joyful. I feel very joyful right now. Hopeful, creative, bubbly. Like these are all words that I use for my light. Bubbly, bright, productive. My emotions and my well-being are more in a bubble. Like I'm called what's internally referenced. My energy, instead of being like negative or down or out, it's like inward. I've turned inward and I'm self-referencing my own core, my own energetic signature. I'm not holding on to other people's moods or their energy. I'm healthier. I sleep better. I laugh more. These are all ways in which I know that I'm in my light. Okay? We each have to discern what that means for each of us. Okay? It's like I said earlier, it's when we're our best, when we feel like our most highest aligned best version of ourselves. And then we need to ask ourselves, how do I get there? If I'm not there right now, how do I get there? What needs to happen for me to be in my light most of the time? That's a really big question. I don't claim to have the answer to that question, like what you need to be in your light all the time. I spend a lot of time on that actually with clients one-on-one. If this happens to be one of their goals, they want to live in their light most of the time, I can't assume all the things that someone may need to be in their light. That list may need to be excavated from that person. Like they may not even know it themselves. Or it may be an endless list, or maybe it's just very specific to that individual. So I don't claim to know, but I can tell you this. In my personal and professional experience and opinion, being in your light requires you to, 1, overcome specific schemas. I'm going to talk about that in detail in a second. Number 2, heal trauma and hurt from painful events or experiences, including unforgiveness. And 3, reprocess triggers with a new perspective or perception. When and if you can do those things, you will live in your light most of the time. I can't guarantee it, but I'm 99.9% certain that if you do those 3 things, you will live in your light most of the time. It's what I've done. And even though, no, I'm not in my light all of the time, I would like to think I'm in my light most of the time. Okay? If I'm not in my light, it's because I'm susceptible to one of these 3 things. And I go pinpoint it and I'm like, oh, I'm not in my light here or right now because I have a trigger with this certain thing. Cool, let's go look at this trigger. Where did it come from? How is it impacting me? What am I believing about myself to be true in this moment that's making me feel like this emotion is real and true right now and that I can't let it go? That's an interesting question. Let me think about that. Let me journal about it. Maybe it takes me a couple days. Maybe I need to talk it out with somebody. Or maybe I just do a meditation and I think about that emotion and energy and I just dissolve it and I let the light come, give me the learnings that I need to learn, and then that emotion can dissolve. And then boom, I'm back to my light. It's so super wonderful. Okay. I want to explain schemas here. I'm sure that most of you know what trauma is and hurtful events and experiences. Like, I don't need to explain that. We got to heal those things. I've explained in lots of other episodes how I believe that we heal those things, so I'm not going to go into it in this episode. And I also believe that more often than not, people know what a trigger is. But if you don't know what a trigger is, it's like a moment in time that reminds you of a past moment in time that was hurtful. And that current moment in time maybe has nothing to do with the past moment in time that hurt you, but it reminds you of it. And so you have a similar reaction in the present moment that you did in the past, right? So it's kind of this like weird wormhole of the past really, really impacting your present, because your consciousness and your conscious and unconscious mind form memories of these hurtful things, and you get triggered by them. I used to call it with my clients trigger tagging. Like, if something becomes really upsetting to you that's really out of the blue and has no other rhyme or reason, there's probably a trigger attached to it, and there might be an experience from the past that you underwent that was really, really harmful or hurtful to you. Okay, I'm going to go into schemas. So just so we're on the same page, as per Google, this is the technical definition of schema, and I'm going to read it here because I have it in my notes. A schema having multiple meanings. A schema is like, it has multiple meanings, including a mental model for organizing information. A mental model for organizing information. I want you to hold on to that because I'm going to be using that in my below explanation. A mental model for organizing information. In psychology and cognitive science, a schema is a pattern of thought or behavior that organizes information and the relationships between categories. I'm going to say it one more time. A schema is a pattern of thought or behavior that organizes information and the relationships between categories. So, for example, when a child encounters a miniature horse for the first time and mistakes it for a dog, they must create, modify, and update their existing schema for both horse and dog. Okay, I'm talking a little bit slower here because I really want to make sure that this lands for you, because schemas are such a big, big deal. When a child encounters a miniature horse for the first time, mistakes it for a dog, they must create, modify, and update their existing schema for both horse and dog. This process of building and updating schemas psychologically is happening so fast in childhood, it's like rapid speed. So children are constantly building their library of schemas. In general, they will turn out to be both helpful and hurtful based on the information they encounter day to day. When information that they encounter is too confusing, overwhelming, hurtful, or harmful, or anything else, like, for instance, a child being told, be quiet, with a hurtful and cutting tone when they're just trying to say something to their parent, those schemas or mental models for organizing information can become maladaptive. So in other words, not providing accurate or appropriate or adequate adjustments to the environment or situation. Let's say in our example that the parent telling their child to be quiet in that really cutting tone is actually, that parent's actually in the middle of something that's really important. They're stressed, they need to focus. And that's the actual environment and situation at hand. The parent doesn't mean any harm to the child intentionally, but they're in a state of mind that is not able to receive the child talking in that moment. So that child hears be quiet with a cutting tone. They haven't experienced that before, and they're trying to organize that information along with the environment and the situation. They can feel energetically that tenseness, that stress, the mild aggression behind the tone of the words be quiet. And when they're unable to unorganize all that information properly, They internalize a whole host of very unhelpful things and beliefs, like I need to keep my mouth shut, I'm not important, mom hates me, no one wants to hear what I have to say, I'm not heard, I'm not loved. Now, as the child, you don't know that this is happening, obviously. And as the parent, if you don't understand this concept, you don't know that this is happening for the child either. And that's the problem. Unless something else happens, like for instance, the parent saying, just 1 second, sweetie, I'm a bit stressed in the middle of something really important, then I can listen to you. If that information is not given, then the child takes the only information they're given, which is the be quiet with a hurtful tone, and turns it into one of those maladaptive thoughts that I just said, like I'm unlovable, people don't care about me, I'm not important, etc., etc. The child stores that in their mental database to exist forever from that point forward, unless otherwise challenged or updated. That new mental model then becomes the self-defeating core themes that child as an adult will keep repeating throughout their life. Okay, so you see how this is starting to form? The additional information that parent could have given in that moment is what determines in many ways if the child organizes that information helpfully or hurtfully. Okay, so you see that a parent actually has so much power in how a child organizes information. That additional information of just 1 second, sweetie, I'm a bit stressed in the middle of something really important, then I can listen to you. Had that additional information been given to the child, that child would have been allowed to assemble this entire experience and its information differently, in more alignment with what's true of the environment and situation, that their mom is just preoccupied and she's stressed and, she'll listen when she's ready. That additional information, had it been given or could have been given, it could have given the child a properly organized and truthful relationship with the original information of be quiet, knowing that their mom still loves them, they want to and can be heard and listened to, they're cared about, they just need to be patient and respectful and speak when it's appropriate. That organization of information or schema is healthy and helpful. Okay, you're seeing the difference here? The maladaptive schema of I'm not cared about is very harmful and very hurtful, obviously. And that gets developed and programmed into the unconscious mind when information is being given to children as they're learning and growing about this crazy reality called humanness. This is a big deal. Schemas are a huge deal. And I don't claim to be a parent coach, like a parenting coach, but boy, I know a lot about parenting because a lot of what I do when I help people is help them reparent their inner child. This is how we do it. If you were to have been given a helpful, healthy parenting style from the get-go, in the very beginning, then you would probably not have as many of these maladaptive schemas, okay? So they start in childhood. These maladaptive schemas, they start in childhood as we're assembling information about the world and reality, ourselves and others, and they become stuck patterns over time. Repetitive behaviors, thoughts, feelings that, like I said, are both helpful and hurtful. They can turn hurtful very easily. And that's what becomes our programming in our unconscious minds for the rest of time, unless otherwise transformed or updated. Okay, so you can see now by understanding this, if you want to get your light back and live in your light, it's going to require that you update all of your maladaptive schemas. How you've organized information about certain events and experiences, and to allow your perception to actually reflect the truth of those events, experiences, and situations, and make it such that the data that you organize in your mind is not hurtful to you or others, it's helpful and healthy. Okay? This is so big. I keep saying it over and over again, but if you're not understanding the gravity of this concept and understanding this concept, please listen to this again, because rewind and listen to what I just said all over again, because there's a very fine line and a like minute difference that is monumental to the rest of a person's life based off of how you give them information and what information they are given. Now, this isn't intended to make you paranoid, and if you've already been a parent and you're like, oh my God, maybe I totally screwed up my kids and this is why they're this way and that way. I'll be totally honest, like so much of my pain and suffering from my story is because I had almost all of these maladaptive schemas that I'm about to share with you, like the most common ones. I had almost all of them. I was not assembling information properly from experiences and events. And granted, yeah, my parenting figures, my mom and dad, bless their hearts and souls, they weren't giving me that additional information in many moments that I would have needed to organize that information better and differently. But through my healing process, I've gone back through many of those events and many of those things, and I've been able to see from a quote unquote bird's eye view, like third-party perspective, what was actually real and true in that experience to be able to update my schema and how I store that information and what's really true about that information, and be able to transform my own internal thought processes and my own internal patterns, right? Because like I said, these maladaptive schemas, how you organize this information, your mental models are built when you're super, super young. You don't even know. Your unconscious mind is still forming until about the age of 7-ish. So you don't even know this is happening. You don't know what your unconscious mind is taking away or what it's learning or what it's not learning and what it's going to, hold on to and the patterns that that's going to develop later on in life. But you better bet your dollar if you're an adult and you know enough about yourself to know that you do struggle with certain patterns or some of these maladaptive schemas I'm about to list, then you'll know that at some point along your journey, whether it was with parents or peers or whoever else it was that you got this information from, like it could even be neighbors. It's so crazy how much influence and impact anyone in your life as a kid can impact you. It doesn't have to be your family. It doesn't have to be your parents, your siblings. It could be anybody. And it could be one time. It doesn't have to be like a repetitive thing that happens over and over again. Like in my example here, when this child gets told, be quiet with a cutting tone, in that one moment, that one instance, that child's unconscious mind could assimilate that information and that situation in its mind and say, oh, I'm unlovable. Mom hates me. I need to keep my mouth shut. I can't talk anymore. I shouldn't speak. And it's just simply not true. You're believing lies from a misperception, from not having all the information in that experience. Okay? I'm about to list the examples of the most common maladaptive schemas. Some of these might hit home for you. Sometimes I have clients, there's a website that I'm going to tell you about that lists these specifically that I think is really great and explains them individually. Sometimes I'm in a session with a client and I show them this website and we go through and we identify which schemas are running and that are active in them. Keep in mind too that sometimes schemas can be dormant. You might not know that you have a certain schema until you're faced with a certain situation. This happens a lot when you get married. People, when they're single and when they're in the honeymoon phase, they don't know that they have these schemas until they're in a long-term committed relationship. They've been married for I don't know how many years. Something comes up, something happens, and then boom, they've got marital problems. It's crazy. Like this is why like adopting the attitude that like life is going to be what it is and we have to have the best attitude that we can to get through it with, taking away the most positive things that we can and learning from it in every moment to the best of our ability. That attitude will get you through more things than anything else. Because life is a journey. It's a roller coaster. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't plan for all these things to happen. It's like, you just got to let the ride. Okay. So if some of these like really hit home for you, or if you're like, oh my God, I think that's me, or that sounds like me, let's do some more research about them. Okay. I'm just going to list these. I'm not going to go into them in extreme detail because I'm already bumping up against an hour. So I appreciate you guys sticking this out with me, but let's go. Okay. Number 1, abandonment. 2, mistrust, abuse. 3, emotional deprivation, which means deprivation of nurturance, empathy, and or protection. Number 4, defectiveness and shame. Number 5, social isolation and alienation. Number 6, dependence or incompetence and or incompetence. Number 7, vulnerability to harm or illness. Number 8, enmeshment and or undeveloped self. Number 9, failure to achieve. Number 10, entitlement and or grandiosity. Number 11, insufficient self-control and or self-discipline. Number 12, subjugation, either of needs or of emotions, meaning that your needs and emotions are not important. Number 13, self-sacrifice. Number 14, approval seeking and or recognition seeking. Number 15, negativity and or pessimism. Number 16, emotional inhibition. Number 17, unrelenting standards and or hypercriticalness. Number 18, punitiveness, which is a tendency to punish yourself or treat yourself harshly when something goes wrong. Some and or all or none of those schemas may resonate with you. If you need to get more of a definition of what some of those might mean, I would like to send you to this website that I find to be very helpful and valuable. I really appreciate the woman who has written it, and she has her own therapy practice. I've had a session with her. Her website is called eggshelltherapy.com. And I believe the schema website has a backslash schema-therapy. So eggshelltherapy.com /schema-therapy. That has been really helpful for me, and that's the website that I show clients when I'm working one-on-one with them to go through and identify some of these schemas. Like I said earlier, I personally have experienced almost all of these, and I've had to go back through and update every single one of them that I developed and had stored mental models for, right? I had either one or many experiences and events that gave me this information that I then stored in my conscious and unconscious of like, oh, I was abandoned. Oh, I, had abuse. I was emotionally deprived of protection and nurturance. I was defective and had so much shame. I was dependent. I had tons of codependency. I was vulnerable to harm and illness. That was a huge one for me. Oh my gosh. I had a failure to achieve and insufficient self-discipline, and I was subjugated. Like, my needs weren't important. My emotions didn't matter. I self-sacrificed. Like, it goes on and on. Like, I had almost all of them. And every single one of these maladaptive schemas was created somehow. If you have one or many of them, it was created somehow by the information that you were exposed to and how you assembled it in your reality as a child. Okay, so I hope that that's clear, like where it's coming from. So living in your light most of the time will require you to update your own maladaptive schemas to reflect the truth about yourself and others. That's how we heal and transform at the deepest unconscious level. Now, if you want to take the next step and actually do this, not just learn about it or know about it, but actually do it, I do recommend working with a mental health professional who is skilled at this and knows what to do to help you transform and update these schemas. I'm one of them. You can go to my website, findinghomehealing.com, schedule a time one-on-one to work with me. If we're a good fit, then we can work together on this. If not, I will definitely refer you or send you elsewhere, just depending on what we both need and what our fits are. Otherwise, I do plan to have future episodes on this stuff to go even deeper into it and answer questions. So if you loved this episode and me talking about all this stuff, leave me a comment, leave a review, send it to your friends, your family, and send me a question or two, and I'll tailor future episodes to what you want to know and what you want to hear. I hope that this has been supportive to you today. I hope that you've taken away so much value. Just as a recap, we talked about your sense of self, how your self is your energetic signature, your domain name to your website. And it's really important before doing anything else to really get connected to your sense of self. We talked about emotions and what it means to be emotionally healthy, what emotions are, how to handle them, how to deal with them, understanding their weight, the highs and the lows of them, the emotional digestion. If you want that tool, feel free to opt in at the website, findinghomehealing.com. And then we went into schemas and how to live in your light most of the time and what being in your light means to you, and really encouraging you to think on that and think back to a time if you've been in it, or if you're in it now, awesome. Or if you want to be in it, like what would it look like for you? What would you want to feel or need to feel to know that you were in your light? And if you're prevented from living in your light, let's address these schemas, these maladaptive schemas that are running. Let's address your trauma and hurtful events and experiences. Let's address your triggers and reprocess those with a new perception. Okay? Hopefully that gives you some next steps and how-tos to use this information to help you to your benefit. I really appreciate you tuning in today. Thank you so very much. My heart is with you, and we'll see you in the next one.